The name of the winery is Magda Pedrini, from the name of the owner, which used to be a teacher at school. And when she got retired, she decided, together with her husband, to buy a very old and in bad condition winery. When she bought the estate in 2006, she just found less than 3 hectares planted with vineyards. They started to replant new vineyards and to recover the existing one. Here we are in Gavi. Gavi is the name of the city and the name of the wine as well. Gavi di Gavi means that the Cortese grapes grown and vinified in the town of Gavi. You have Gavi di OCG, normal, and then Gavi di Gavi, which is the center of the production, the heart of the production of the Gavi di OCG from Cortese grapes. We now have 11 hectares, more or less, and planted with Cortese grapes. Cortese grapes is a white grape, very typical of the Piemonte. You can find Cortese in other parts of Piemonte, but only here in Gavi it could be called Gavi di Gavi. The wine could be called Gavi or Gavi di Gavi. There are other 10 communes or towns that are allowed to produce the normal Gavi, but here in the town of Gavi, because of the soil, the microclimate, considered the best place to vinify, to produce, grown and vinify the Gavi di Gavi. So just to give you an idea, this year, 2017, the price of the normal Gavi di OCG, €2, 20, 30, more or less, while the Gavi di Gavi is €3.50. We used to produce red wine as well, which is called Il Petirosso, but we own 2 hectares of vineyards in Nizza, Monferrato, close to Asti, which is the best place to grow the Barbera. And it's a blend of Barbera and Cabernet Sauvignon. Our range of wines includes 2 different Gavi di Gavi. The first one is the Gavi di Gavi E, which means he's a Gavi, a Gavi. It's a typical Gavi di Gavi wine, so high acidity, but very fine, the right acidity. We call it the right acidity. Then we have La Piacentina, Gavi di Gavi, which is a single vineyard with particular kind of soil. They are marns, blue marns. Then we have a Spumante, Gavi di Gavi, DOCG. It's a traditional method, so made with champagne, just using Cortese grapes, because for the DOCG regulation, we must use just Cortese grapes. No blends are allowed. So if you want to call it Gavi di Gavi, you must be very careful because we have a lot of checks and inspections. But the first 2 are the still wine, are fermented in steel tanks. For the first one, the E, we press the grapes very gently, very softly, because Cortese is a very delicate grape. We extract the first must. In Italian is called mosto fiore, and we move the must in the steel tanks for the fermentation. For the second wine, the single vineyard, La Piacentina, we press the grapes very softly, very gently, and then let the must we obtain in touch with the skins of the grape for 36 hours at cold temperature. I mean 4 or 5 degrees, not more, to extract more aromas and flavor. So it's a bit more complex, the second one. The Spumante is bottle fermented, is a champenoise, so bottle fermented, even if we also have 3 pressure tanks, autoclavi, for the production of the tank fermented spumante. but we just produce bottle fermented, which is more suitable for Cortese grapes. Ferment the whole tank, which is 2,500 liters or 5,000 liters. Have a second fermentation to have the bubbles in a big tank or each bottle fermented. So there's a huge difference. I mean, the still fermented wine, sparkling wine, have a bigger bubble, but bottle fermented spumante, sparkling, very thin, very little bubbles, but very persistent, so it longs a lot. We normally pick up the grapes in September, depending on the weather. This year we started on the 8th of September. Because of the dryness, we will lose the 30% of our production, unluckily, but the quality is very high. So now we have the new wine. The must ferment for 12-15 days at 16 degrees. So it's a slow fermentation because Cortese is delicate, so we must be very careful not to lose aromas or perfume. This is the new wine that we are going to bottle next March or April. And for the DOCG regulation, we must put a sign on every tank with the name, so master or wine or sparkling, the color, the vintage, the batch, and DOCG, the Gavi, del Comune di Gavi, so we must be very careful to trace everything from the beginning to the bottle. This is the place where we produce our spumante, traditional method, and even the red wine in big barrels and barriques too. The sparkling, we use the normal Gavi di Gavi, fermented in steel tanks. Then we bottle in this very heavy bottle, adding some yeast, sugar, to have the second fermentation in the bottles. So the yeast and the sugar becomes bubbles. We let it ferment for 36 months, 3 years. Then we made the manual remuage. That yeast goes in this part of the neck of the bottle. So we put in the pupitre. These are called the pupitre from the French name. And from this position, we move quarter, 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 with up to this position, so more vertical as possible, so that yeast goes close to the cap. Then we freeze this part of the neck of the bottle with a special machine. We freeze. We remove this machine, mechanical machine that remove the crown cap. The pressure inside the bottle, the PSI makes the ice pull out the bottle. We refill the bottle with the same vintage wine because it is a millesime, and then we put the normal mushroom cork for the spumante. This is the making. Always the Gavi di Gavi DOCG spumante must be vintage, millesime each vintage.
Some champagnes will have a vintage. It says, NV, which means non-vintage. They're blending several vintages to make the ideal. On the best years of champagne, they'll make a single vintage, the millesime, a single vintage. Same thing with cava, but most cavas and proseccos are just non-vintage. Cava does the same exact thing, they bottle ferment like this, but some of those wineries are now mechanicalized to do this process, where it's done by machine.
Yeah.
Which is why Cava can be a lot less expensive than somebody sitting there turning champagne. They sit there, I mean, you have guys who do nothing but riddle the bottles, and
I turn by myself each bottles last vintage. I have a pictures to prove. Yeah, I have a picture. When we start to turn, we make a sign on the bottle so everyone knows how many times that's been turned. It's good for your arms because it's like gym. And on the big barrels and on the barrique, we have the Barbera mixed with Cabernet Sauvignon from Nizza. We pick up the grapes in Nizza, and with a special truck, we bring the grapes immediately here in Gavi. So we vinified red wine here in Gavi. We press the grapes, of course, and we leave the skins in touch with the must. Otherwise, we obtain white wine. To extract the color and, of course, tannins, aromas, you must ferment the first must in touch with the red skins, because the first juice is white. For example, the Pinot Noir in France, they vinify in white. They just press, leave for just a bit in touch with the skins, and so they have a white wine from red grapes.
so it's not it's the skin contact that makes the wine red. So Pinot Noir, which makes champagne, can be rosé or clear.
It's called Blanc De Noirs because it's a blanc wine, white wine, obtained by red noir grapes. Leaving the skins in touch with the must for 8 to 10 days at least. Then we separate the solids from the liquid part. It's a Monferrato Rosso DOC. Yeah, while the Gavi is DOCG, so controlled and guaranteed. This is just control. We blend the two grapes immediately. First of all, we move to the steel tanks. Miss Pedrini, the owner of the stage, she understands English, but she just speaks a little. Thank you for your visit. And Kika, Miss Pedrini has 5 dogs. She has 4 little dogs and 1 rescued from a shelter. Miss Pedrini and I meet each other for the dogs and cats because I'm a volunteer in an association, and Miss Pedrini, of course, is one of our sponsors. She has a lot to raise money, and so we met each other for the association. And then we start our business cooperation. So let's talk about the red wine. First of all, in steel tanks. And then we move 50% in the barrels, in the barriques, and 50% of the mass in big barrels of 1,500 liters. So we have 2 different fermentation. Big, 225 liters, so smaller and bigger. Then at the end, after 18 months, more or less, we move to, again in steel tanks for 6 months, depending on our enologist decision. And then we bottle the red wine here in Gavi, in our winery. And then wait 1 more year before selling the new vintage. So now we have the 2013 for the Spumante.
How long can you keep the barrels?
The bigger one for years and years and years, there's no problem. That one for 4 or 5 times. Then we have to sell them and have a new one. And normally we buy the new one for the red, used for 2 times for the white wines. it's wise to choose used barrique just 2 times. In this part, we have, we call it the naked bottles. In these cases, wooden cases. These are the naked bottles, bottiglie nude, because bottling the white wines needs cold. So when we bottle at cold temperature, we have condensation, and we can't put the adhesive labels immediately. So we put the bottles in these cases, wooden cases, and then when we have orders from our customers, we put back in the machine and label. The big wineries have a special machine to dry the condensation, but volume, it's okay like that. So we can put the label for each customer, because you know that in USA they have a special back labels, the same in Russia, in Japan, in China. So we do export the 80-85% of our production. And so it's wise to leave the bottle like that and then put label, back labels, DOCG label, capsule, and everything on. Put in the cases. It's more or less 100,000 bottles per year. And you see that every case has its own sign with the name of the wine, the vintage, and so on. On your right, you can see the press. This is the press we use for the white wines, for the Gavi di Gavi. It's a very technical and modern press, which could work with or without oxygen, because depending on the enologist, you can have someone consider a good things to have a bit of oxygenation to create oxidation, just a bit. It depends on the enologist. So we use the press without oxygen to have the wine fresh. Cortese is a wine very fresh, very with acidity, so elegant, fine. We do prefer to vinify in that way. Our bottling machine is a small bottling machine, but very complete. So we move the wines from the steel tank to the machine. There's a filtration. Then we put the empty bottles there. The machine moves. Here we sanify and dry each bottle. Then we fill the bottle with the wine, put the natural cork, and this part is the labeling machine. First of all, the capsule. Then in this part we put the label, front label, back label, DOCG label, and there 2 people put the bottles in the cases manually, because it's a small production, a niche production. For example, we produce just 3,000 bottles of Champenoise method, spumante, sparkling, and 200 magnums, 1.5 liters. So it's a niche production. We can do it manually. So of course, there are bigger wineries which has red grapes, because you can imagine the farmers in the ancient. They have also the red wines. I mean, in the past, generally, the white wines were drinking by the rich and noble people, and the red wines were drinking by the farmers. Because in Italy we say that red wines makes blood. So give you power, give you more power to go to work in the field, in the vineyards. It's a very hard work, especially during winter. When it rains, when it snows, you have to prune, you have to, in the cold, very cold temperature weather. And so white wines, very fine, elegant for rich people, and red wine for farmers and villains. Gavi became DOC in 1974 and DOCG in 1998. So it's a recent. Nothing red, we just have Barbera del Monferrato DOC. You can call it Barbera or Monferrato Rosso DOC. No DOCG. In Gavi, they prefer to use or red wine, general red wine, or DOC at the maximum. Someone buy the wines and bottle by themselves and call it Barbera d'Asti DOCG, for example. It depends on the winery and the volume of the selling. The whole denomination produce 14 millions of bottles in total. Gavi and Gavi di Gavi, 14. The whole area, just 14 millions of bottles. Compared to Prosecco, for example, yeah, it's a very small production. And I think that the biggest winery has 60 hectares in Cortese. Then there are many bottlers outside the Gavi town that buy the wine and then bottle outside this area. Because Gavi, for the DOCG rules, must be grown, of course, and vinified, so fermented here in Gavi. Then when the wine is ready, when the wine is wine and not must, you can sell it outside the area to be bottled everywhere. I found a bottle a few years ago, a bottle of Gavi bottled in Sardinia. It depends. Many wineries here in Piemonte decided to have their own Gavi or Gavi di Gavi because it's very popular nowadays in UK and US, Germany. In Italy, we have many wineries owned by women. And in fact, we have an organization called Women of Wine, Le Donne del Vino, and Miss Pedrini is involved in Le Donne del Vino.
Sempre amato la campagna, la natura e il vino, e c'è stata questa possibilità, è stata una scelta e una sfida poi. Ecco.
She always been in love, of course, with nature and Gavi landscape and wine, of course. And then she decided to have a new challenge and begin a new project in the wine business for passion. Passione. Miss Pedrini is involved in a wine in the winery, of course. Her husband lives and works outside Italy, abroad since 1970 something. I can't remember the exact. And they have no children.
Vi porto a pranzo che devo andare perché alle 2 vengono a fare una specie di trasloco.
Okay. 2 years ago, Miss Pedrini bought another estate in January 2016. It's a very ancient winery. Paper talking about the other winery are dated back 12th century. Here in Gavi, together with with a business partner, they decided to buy this very huge and ancient winery, which were abandoned by the previous owner. So the other winery needs a lot of works and renovations and restoration in the vineyards. And even there's a beautiful villa dated 16th century. So next time we will visit the other winery called Giustiniana. It has 40 hectares of Cortese grapes. It's in production, and you can find Giustiniana wines in New York. So we can visit the oldest part of this winery from the middle of 18th century. It's our small hamlet called Cadameo, which means Casa di Bartolomeo, probably. So, house of Bartolomeo, probably the owner in the 18th century was this man called Bartolomeo, and they give the name of the little hamlet Cadameo. This building is quite new. First of all, when Miss Pedrini bought the estate, they have a very small cellar. So when they started to have the new vineyards in production, when Miss Pedrini decided to build this new cellar in 2008, and they finished in 2011. So everything is new. The first house, very big, you see, it's from the 20th century, beginning of 20th century, while the part on the left side, it's 18th century old, and it's the Casina Cadameo, Farm Cadameo. You can see 1768. The sign. Okay, this is the oldest part of the estate. We can enter. This is the oldest building in the estate. It's proved by this wall, and all the renovation has been made by Miss Pedrini, carry on by Miss Pedrini. Because when she bought this estate, everything was in ruin. We have a place for the tasting. This will be our shop as soon as possible. We just miss the place to show our bottles. We have an office upstairs and a little place to warm, to serve food. Also, we do organize events like dinners, parties, weddings. So we have many people in the estate. Miss Pedrini loves to have people inside and to use the winery at the best. Of course, we are focused on the production of the wine, first of all. Then when we have the right and perfect quality, we can use the estate for other. Okay? And now we are going to taste our wines. Okay? The name of this, the little town you see is Prato Lungo. That way, there's a church, a few houses. It's a small hamlet in the district of the town of Gavi. We have a wishing well. And we also used to have 2 dogs. Some years ago, we rescued 2 dogs from a shelter with Miss Pedrini. 2 very old ladies. Yeah, we are a very pet-friendly winery. We have a lot of wild animals like deer, wild boars, hares, everything. A lot of birds. And you can see the Pettirosso in the ring